We're going to delve into this today. In organizations that care for people with disabilities, the direct support staff, they're on the front lines, right? They're the ones that our clients see most often. And if we can train them to respond with immediate support and compassion, then we are increasing the likelihood that our clients are going to be able to handle death losses better. I just think about the way group homes and day hubs kind of run. As much as I want to be there for every single one of my clients, I can't be, right? I have with the number of clients I have, I pop in, I pop out. And so I am not the consistent one in their lives. People higher up, they might want to be involved, but they're not consistent in their lives. In fact, I'll even say staff isn't always consistent because they come and go, but staff are going to be more consistent and more readily available than other people in the organization, which is why we kind of want to go back and train them. And what I've seen too, and this obviously is going to vary person to person, but people with disabilities, especially if they're in a group home setting, I've seen a lack of family support. And that's no shame. I'm not shaming any family. I don't know their situation. But I have seen the reality of when they go into a group home, there's less consistent communication between them and family or them and outside support for a variety of reasons, right? Maybe they don't have access to their phone. They have to schedule a visit, lots of things. But the point is that when they experience that death loss, they don't have immediate access to support where they might have access to support if they were at home with the family, or with the outside support system. So if we can train that staff, then we're really just increasing the number of people that can be in this client support network to really help them through these grief losses. So a quick question, what are some of the barriers to people with disabilities receiving therapy when they're grieving?
Hello, I'm finished as well.
Yeah, what are some barriers? Yeah, Lauren said, I live in an area where many of our clients are raised by parents and grandparents. Yeah, dealing with the subject now. Yeah, that's really hard. Okay, resources. Yes, oh my gosh, there's a lack of resources. Processing, behaviors that occur when experiencing grief. People who care enough. Oh my gosh, Matt, like that can be the reality of the situation as much as we don't want to say it is. Preconceived notions that they can't handle the loss. Lack of resources, communication, lack of advocacy. Yes, all of these things. Yeah, I love that you guys are already so aware of the fact that they may need more support and therapy, but they're not getting it because there are barriers. So like you guys mentioned, these are some that I was thinking of or that, also pop up in the research. There's a belief that if we talk about death, it's going to increase challenging behaviors. The reality of the situation is it might initially, because death is hard and grief is hard, right? But those behaviors can go down if we continue to have support. Not talking about death is going to make things even harder down the line. Communication and cognitive barriers. And I've talked about, I had clients who I thought needed some additional grief support. We couldn't find a therapist. We couldn't find a therapist that was, that knew how to handle the cognitive differences. We couldn't find a therapist that was familiar or comfortable with AAC devices. Again, no fault to them. It's, an additional training piece. They're on a fixed income. How many of them can even afford a grief therapist? Is insurance paying for grief therapy? I highly doubt that. Lack of transportation. How are they even going to get to the therapy appointment, right? If you're in a group home setting, if you're at a day hub, you have one staff to 3 to 4 clients, if you're lucky, and you guys have a schedule. You have a schedule. And the only way you might get to grief therapy is if we truck everyone else along with us. Staff availability. I've seen this too. There often isn't staff that's even available to take them. And behaviors happening during grieving therapy sessions. Yeah, I could have a whole other conversation about that too, but I will refrain and stick to what we're talking about. But if you want to talk more about that, send me an email, we'll chat. Okay, so we know there are barriers, right? So why might direct support staff be the best option when providing initial grief support? I mean, I kind of gave the answer away, but I would love to hear additional comments from you. Why do you think they might be a maybe not, I hate the word best. Why might they be a better option? They've already paired with the client. Yes. They have rapport. Exactly. They are easily accessible. They have frequent interaction with the client. They already have a relationship. Yes, 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 yes. Everyday interaction. Yeah. Yeah, they know the client's nuances. Yes. Yeah, all of that's perfect. Yeah, so that's why direct support staff really might be the best option when it comes to providing support because, like you guys said, they oftentimes already have a relationship with the client. There's some trust that's built there, there's some rapport. And I mean, that right there is golden, right? Um, I recently took, it was a really interesting class about palliative care, but it was from the Royal College of Nursing. And I want to read a quote that one of the people there gave because I think it really speaks to what we're trying to accomplish when we're training people on how to help someone with a disability through grief. This person said, when someone is dying or experiencing the death of someone close to them, they are experiencing some of the most complex emotions that they will ever go through. Oh, like sit with that for a second, right? The most complex emotions they will ever go through throughout their lives. And these emotions need to be acknowledged and witnessed. Sorry. I feel really strongly about this. This is why we're learning about this. This is why we're talking about this. This is why we train staff, because up until recently, people with disabilities, they had those complex emotions ignored and punished, which did not help them deal with the grief, right? So that's why we're really learning about this. So what are some things that can happen if we're not actively training staff? And I want to acknowledge here that staff are trying their best. They're trying their best in a job that is so, so difficult. Um, and I think a lot of times they care. I've seen staff that don't care, but I also have seen staff that care. And so I understand that a lot of times with staff, it's coming from a place of caring, but the intent and the result are two different things, right? So if we're not training staff, what can often happen is they may see an increase in behaviors, or like I like to say, they see an increase in grief responses, right? Responses to a death loss, and they might punish those responses. Um, this is why I really got into this. This was not my client. It was something that another staff member was dealing with, but there was an aunt who had just there was an aunt and the niece had just lost her mom. Lost. Look, I did a euphemism. Her aunt had just died. Um, and she was at the group home. And of course, this poor thing is just crying and crying. Her mom is gone. Her caregiver is gone. She ended up in this group home because no one else knew how to take care of her. And the aunt was talking on the phone to this girl and overheard the staff come in and start swearing at this client, saying, shut the F up. You're going to make everyone else have behaviors. A lot of really horrible things and statements that should never have been said. Um, I think that happened for a variety of reasons, but what I see is a staff member that sees behaviors that are happening and are responding with punishment techniques rather than compassion and curiosity. And I do think that training and support from the organization that they're working with can help decrease some of those responses from staff. And even if we're not talking about punishment, there is a tendency for staff to use strategies that might exacerbate the grief later on. So for instance, they might use distraction. One thing that I've seen is, well, we're not going to talk about right now, focus on your coloring sheet. Okay, well, we're not doing this right now. I can't hear about your grandma right now. We're actually going to start the cooking class. Some of that's because unfortunately they have a schedule they have to keep and there are all these things that they have to navigate. But I have also seen that they want to distract the client because in the moment it's easier to distract and not deal with the behavior. However, long term, we're going to have more problems because that the feelings of grief were never processed. And the individual leaves that interaction without support, without compassion. and feeling like they don't have access to support and compassion, which is going to increase, feelings of anxiety, depression, loneliness. Um, Another thing that can happen if we're not actively training staff about grief is that some grief responses may go unnoticed. Um, there's a tendency, I think, to we focus a lot on the externalizing behaviors. We focus on the big behaviors. That's what we can see, right? And so staff might notice, oh, hey, when their mom died, I noticed that this client has been, I don't know, engaging in more property destruction than before. Staff may not notice more nuanced behaviors, like they're more compliant than they ever used to be, right? Someone is grieving well when they turn into the easy person for us to deal with, when the reality is that easy person for you to deal with is grieving, and we're not supporting them in their grief. They also might not be aware of some of the somatic symptoms. All of a sudden, sleeping a lot, talking about aches and pains, that is very much grief related. And if we are not aware of that connection and we're not training staff about that connection, we might just be treating something medical and forgetting that there are emotional and environmental things that happen that are causing this physical pain. Okay. Um, So there are definitely concerns that staff have when it comes to helping, which I totally get. They think that it's not their place, right? I'm here to take care of the clients. I'm not here to be a counselor. And they are correct. They are correct. I don't want to make it sound like I'm saying we can all be counselors or we can train people to be counselors because that's practicing outside of our scope and damage can be done. But we can be compassionate, right? Like we shouldn't have to be trained on how to be a compassionate person.